S.H Figuarts Dragon Ball Z Raditz was released on the 23rd of March here in Japan as a Bandai premium exclusive and retails for 7,000 yen or $70 as listed on the Bandai premium US site. As per usual, this is the Japanese release. For Bandai premium US pre-orders, shipping is scheduled for late April. So Figuarts Raditz was the #1 release I was looking forward to this year, up until probably a couple of weeks ago when this bad boy was announced. Needless to say, Raditz was a character that was well overdue for a figure, and I, like many other collectors out there, were ecstatic to finally see our hopes and dreams materialized in 6-inch plastic form. So does this figure live up to all the excitement and hype? Yes, for the most part, but there are a few areas I personally would have liked to have been done just a little different. Don't get me wrong, I really do like this figure, but as I mentioned earlier, my expectations for the figure might have been a little too high. But anyway, let's start with the positives, and there are plenty. So I want to say it was around the time Kaioken 2.0 was released that Havoc Toys on Instagram. I'll have his account in the description below, so do make sure you check his account out. Posted a digital mock-up of Kaioken Goku and base form Scouter Vegeta with anime manga-esque eyes. I think the digital render was originally by an account by the name of Ryan Liu. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm trying to get at is that the faces on the right, the anime-esque faces, look so much more expressive and of course are more akin to the anime. Just by changing the eyes, you get so much more expressiveness, and that's exactly what they did with Raditz. The heads, and for the most part the hair, are beautifully sculpted as they should be, being one of the defining points of Raditz's design. The first thing I noticed was how anime manga-esque the faces looked, and this is probably one of the best things about the figure in my opinion. The overall proportions are great too. He's tall, he's got that more solid build compared to some of the other Saiyans. In terms of size, I feel that Raditz is a good height. I'm not an expert when it comes to scale, but to me, he's always been between Goku and Nappa, and I think his size works pretty good overall. I'm liking the sculpt work on his armor, the way they made the cut between his chest and his lower torso. The arms and legs are nice and chunky, not too ripped, as I guess that's how the art style was in early Dragon Ball Z. But yes, in general, the sculpt work and proportions are aces. Fantastic representation of Raditz. So here is where the figure kind of loses a few points for me, and I feel that this is something that you guys might not even care about, but since we're talking about the details, I feel the areas where they chose to apply paint could have been a little bit more thought out. As per usual with nearly all the recent releases from the Dragon Ball line, paint is pretty sparse, and when we do get some paint apps, it's usually pretty well done. So I'm generally cool with little paint apps, as that generally means less paint chipping or paint rubbing to worry about when you're actually posing the figure. But with Raditz, for some reason, the shoulder pads, the waist pads, which aren't painted, are cast in a plastic that looks and kind of feels cheap, for lack of a better word. The brown on the ab section, and I'm not sure how that's showing up on camera, looks great. It's a dark, rich brown that has been painted, but the bare brown plastic used on the pads just looks a little cheap to me. The grey outline areas are painted, but are now more prone to paint chipping, which I know some people have been experiencing, so just be careful, especially around the ab area. They've gone with the glossy chest armor again as they did with Bardock, but this time, no shading, just a straight black. The only shading we get is with his extra tail, which is hidden by his hair most of the time anyway, and that's okay. Some people like the gloss finish, some people don't, but for me, I'll probably hit it with some flat matte coat after I finish this review. So the last little nitpick I have is probably one you guys are already aware of, and that's the hair. It looks absolutely beautiful from the front and the back, but when you get to the side, well, the word that comes to mind is flat. And I've seen people say it has to do with the articulation, but the hair really wouldn't get in any more way than it does now. I think it has more to do with balance, as Raditz is still a little top heavy, but definitely holds his stance a lot better than Super Saiyan 3 Goku. It might be a little tricky at first, but if you have his feet leaning ever so slightly forward, you can position the hair to give Raditz a better center of gravity, and you should be okay standing him up straight. I can tell that Tamashii have tried to rectify the problems with Super Saiyan 3 Goku. The hair this time around is made from a softer, rubbery plastic, and the neck joint has significantly more friction to hold up all that weight, for now, but I guess only time will tell. It's not horrible by any means, but you can see it really doesn't look all that good when you compare the sculpt work on the front and the back. It's not that the sculpt isn't there, but it definitely loses a lot of dimension. It's not a deal breaker or anything, and most of the time you're probably not going to pose Raditz on his side, but I think the figure would have looked a lot better in all angles with the hair a little bit more filled out. Okay, so for a figure that has, I guess you could essentially say, a lot of restrictions in terms of his shoulder pads, his side pads, the crotch pad, the weight of his hair, Raditz actually has quite a really good range of articulation. Oh, there he goes. Sorry. Yeah, and I guess that's kind of carried over from his previous release, Bardock, the Ginyu Force, and you can really see some of that engineering going into this figure, which is fantastic actually. I was going to start off with the head. So Bardock, he does look up, and he does have an independent neck joint, but without using that, and there goes his face. Sorry guys, there we go. With just the head on its own, not using the independent neck joint, he does look up this much, and he can look down quite far as well. Of course, you get side-to-side movement, but the hair does get in the way and doesn't let you go. Actually, you can move the hair out of the way, and he moves left and right this much. He does have some tilt, and there the neck joint does help a bit. As I mentioned before, I'm going to take off the faceplate, but the friction with his neck joint and that hinge here is fantastic because it holds up all of that weight. Speaking of the hair, it does have a ball joint right there, so you are able to move the hair a little bit. And that does help balancing out Raditz when you're having standing up straight. You can move his hair, closer to his body to give him a closer center of gravity. I'm going to put his face back on. There we go. So the cool thing about this figure that is, I think, new, I don't remember any other figure having this, is that his shoulder pads here have a double hinge. So they are hinged here at the actual shoulder pad itself, but they're also hinged here at the armor. So traditionally, when you have figures with Saiyan armor, you try to get the arm going forward and it hits the shoulder pad, so you're going to move it up. But with this, with the double joints, the double hinges, you can move one hinge, move that hinge back, pull it down, and you can still achieve that front forward arm articulation without you having to push the shoulder plate, the shoulder pads all the way up like that. And I think that's fantastic that they thought of that. So really well done there by Tamashii. Some great engineering. Raditz does have butterfly joints, so you can move his shoulders in and out. He moves his arms past 90 degrees, and you do get 360 at the shoulder. But again, if you want to go all the way up like this, it's unavoidable. Even with those double hinges, you got to move the shoulder pads up like that. You get bicep swivel. Mine's is a little bit tight. Yours might be as well, so do be careful. Ooh, really tight. Might have to heat that up, kind of loosen it up a little bit, but yes, bicep swivel, double jointed elbows. My wrist is a little, there we go, or a little loose, but he does have swivel there at the wrists. And of course, hinges. There we go, hinges as well. So for his ab crunch, and as I mentioned before, you got to be careful because a lot of people have told me that because these white areas here are painted, it is prone to chipping or rubbing. So he does have some really good ab crunch, but I would be careful when you are, fiddling around with that section of the articulation. So he does crunch forward quite well and back quite nicely as well. You do get some swivel there. No tilt, unfortunately. But you do get slight, and I mean very slight waist articulation, and it's pretty limited. And if you try to go too far, it kind of pops off like that. And that's because of the design. All those shoulder pads there do kind of get in the way. So do be careful of that, not to push it too far. It pops off and it pops on pretty easily, so you're not going to have too much of a problem. Looking at the legs, Raditz can do the splits almost perfectly. So you get some pretty good range of motion there. There we go, nice spready. If you do that, yes, the side skirts, the side pads there do pop off, so do be careful. You don't want to break anything. Raditz kicks forward this much, about 90. He does have upper thigh cut, double jointed knees. You get rotation there at the feet, swivel at the feet, down, slightly up. You do get some toe articulation, of course, and some pretty decent, actually really nice ankle tilt as well. So overall, pretty impressive articulation. You just got to be careful again of the crotch area, not the crotch area, sorry, the ab section because of the paint. Yes, the crotch area, those pads will pop off if you go too far with the legs. And yeah. So we get some pretty decent accessories with Raditz. No energy effects this time around, but I'm pretty happy with what we get in this set overall. 4 interchangeable heads, again beautifully sculpted and excellent expressions. You have to swap out the scouter each time, just like the Ginyu Force figures, and remove the top hairpiece as well. Two fists, 2 open palms, 2 blast hands, some crossed arms, just like Perfect Cell, Vegeta, Vegito, and Frieza. I think that's it. Oh, and Piccolo. An interchangeable tail. And a back armor plate piece with a peg hole for those in the air poses. They did the same thing with G's and a similar thing with the 2.0 Piccolo, and I'm really liking this idea as the claws you get with the Tamashii stands are pretty weak and a little bit of a nuisance to Photoshop out after taking pictures if you do that sort of thing. So simply put, Raditz is a great figure and a great example of what Tamashii have been doing with their line recently. They've taken all of the good from the Ginyu Force, from Bardock, and put it into this figure. Yes, I do have a few minor nitpicks with the application of paint and the design choices they made with the hair, but overall, I really do like this figure. I can't stress that enough, and there is just plenty to like about it. The sculpt work, the articulation, the new engineering in the shoulders, and I just really hope Tamashii takes all of this good that they're doing with their recent figures and apply them to future releases. I really hope they continue the anime-esque faces, and in this case, improved engineering with the joints to counter heavier or hard to balance design elements of the character's design. So if you're watching Tamashii, and I know you're not, you sons of bitches, you're doing a good job overall, so just take that good, go forth, and give us some awesome figures. But I'll leave it at that. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this lengthy review. Show us some love by dropping me a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and comments are always appreciated. Thanks guys for tuning in, have a fantastic week, stay safe, keep healthy, and I'll be seeing you all real soon. Yoroshiku!